Good evening. My name is Steve Tallheimer. I'm the Superintendent of Elkhart Community Schools, and thank you for joining us virtually for a presentation this evening. When I became Superintendent of Elkhart Schools almost 3 years ago in January of 2019, I came into the district and spent some time in my first couple months here visiting different schools, talking to district leadership, talking to people in various departments around the district. And after those conversations, I met with the school board in February of 2019, towards the end of the month, in a retreat for us to look at our strategic plan and to establish priorities as we would go forward. And during that visit and time with the board, we established a series of some priorities that were going to be our areas of emphasis as we went forward into the coming months and years. Those drove our priorities through much of my first year here, and then as you know, when we hit February and March of 2020, the pandemic closed down our schools. We were dealing with that and through much of last year as well. So it was important for us as we came out of the pandemic and begin to emerge back to a more sense of normal, and as I'm approaching the end of my 3 years here, I asked our Board of Trustees for us to engage in a process of auditing where we are. Are those the appropriate priorities for us still? What progress have we made on those priorities through all of the tumultuous times of the past couple years? And in what areas could we potentially improve? So for that, we engaged with Alex McNeece, Superintendent and Administrative scholar from Michigan, who has worked with our district in some other ways doing culture audits within our individual buildings. But it was important for us to see how that was all fitting together in the district level and the district perspective. So at this point, I will introduce Alex and allow him to come and talk to you a little bit about his perspective on his work as a culture auditor and what that means in terms of the performance that we have as a school district. Alex.
Thank you, Dr. Tallheimer. I'm Dr. Alex McNeece. It is a pleasure to be here in Elkhart today and sharing this priority audit. A little bit about me. I am a parent of school-age kids. I'm a consultant. I'm an author. I currently work in a school district, and I care very deeply about how schools function because our students need the very best experience while they are here to meet their dreams. It's been a pleasure to come into Elkhart schools and to look at these priorities and to be in your classrooms, to sit in the collaborative team meetings, to work side by side with many of the principals, the building level principals on the school culture audits, and to take a look at the district in a large scale and look at the priorities has been an honor, and I would like to share that with you today. So very first, what is our priority audit? This document is a district level organizational culture analysis. A team of researchers came to the district and identified the priorities that were being communicated and implemented. An inventory was developed around district priorities and given to instructional staff. More than 300 instructional staff completed the survey. That data were used to generate the questions for other members of the school team and greater Elkhart community. The superintendent, non-certificated staff, the Teachers Association leadership, corporate level administration, building administration, community members, board members, and parents were all part of these interviews. I'd like to read just one little section here. I'll be going back and forth to the document and back to the PowerPoint, and actually you'll be contributing sometime soon, but I want to make sure that I get this right. The main priority is for Elkhart Community Schools. I mean, this came to me so quickly by watching the very first board meeting, how you guys start your board meetings with the Elkhart Promise. You read the Elkhart Promise before every board meeting. You find that artifact of the Elkhart Promise in so many places around the district. That is, every student is known by name, challenged and supported by highly effective staff, and in partnership with the community will graduate career, college ready, and life ready. I genuinely appreciate this as your district's mission statement and how much I saw it throughout the district. Let's see, 3. All right, moving on. The research behind the audit. First, let's take a look. And what was I looking at? Essentially, this is an organizational culture audit. So let's talk really quickly about what is culture. Now, apologies to all the people at home and all the people here, all right, because this is the most boring slide in the entire slide deck, all right? This is a challenge to get through. If we can get through this, we can get through anything. Because this slide comes directly from my dissertation, which is on organizational culture. So let's talk about this. What is culture? So when I say what is culture, what are we talking about? And first, it is the patterns of shared basic assumptions that we have about how we do things around here. It's how you talk to each other. It's the behavioral norms. It's the vocabulary you use. It's your routines. These are all the things that we can see around us. These assumptions were learned by the group of people when dealing with the problems of the past. We had an issue, we had to solve it, we came together, we figured out how to solve it, and that became how we do things around here. Next, those assumptions solve problems of two very brainy concepts, external adaptation and internal integration. And what those really mean, external adaptation is problems from the outside, and internal integration means we're always new people. We're always getting new people into the organization, all right, and people are always retiring and moving out. So that's what how we do things around here helps us solve those problems we get in those two areas. One thing we need to recognize is that organizations or groups, any group, we exist to help solve the problems, and problems are always a constant. If students just became learned, we would not need schools. If fires put themselves out, we would not need firemen or firewomen. Therefore, culture is both a dynamic phenomenon, that means it's always changing, and a socialization process. It's how we teach each other how we're going to behave and talk around here, how we're going to manage each other, how we're going to lead. It's a socialization process due to the nature of constant problem solving. All right, it doesn't look like anyone's asleep, but you guys made it. This is the end of the slide, so thank you so much, all right? This is how I like to think about culture. This makes it a little bit easier. All right, culture manifests itself in 3 different levels. And the top level, the one we can see, those are called artifacts. These are the visible organizational artifacts that are around the room, or these are the things you hang on the wall of your home. Those things you put onto the wall, those are your artifacts. Think about what they mean to you. What values do they communicate? And that's the next underlying layer. We have our artifacts we can see, and your artifacts communicate a value. Think about the Elkhart Promise. Think about what it says to me, a stranger in your community, what you value. That's what culture is all about. From looking at the artifacts and looking at the values of all the different artifacts and all the different conversations, you can start to see the beliefs of people. But beliefs, you can infer beliefs, you can't see beliefs. That's the deepest layer of culture. When I came in to do school culture audits and when I came to do the district culture audit, we are looking for the artifacts. In the interviews that we did with people, we looked for common vocabularies and common routines and common norms that were around the Elkhart Promise and the 6 priorities. But before we get too into it, we're going to have a little fun here because I'm a teacher at heart. I loved being a teacher, and so I love instructional strategies. My books are on instructional strategies, and I'm going to use one right here. We're going to play a little game, and yes, audience participation. You didn't know you're going to be participating, but you are. We're going to play a game called Team Pair Solo, and we have just enough people to play Team Pair Solo, so I'm very pleased, all right? I'm going to put some pictures up here, and these pictures are artifact rich. You're going to see some artifacts, and I want you as a team, we're just going to shout out things. What's an artifact you see, and then what value do you think it communicates? Can you guys do that for me? Can you guys do that for me? All right, here we go. Now, this is one. What are the artifacts? And then what do you think it communicates that these people value? Shout them out. Holiday. What? But they value holiday, but what artifact did you pick up on? Wreath. You got lights. All right. What else do they value? Or give me the artifact and what do they value? Family, and that's sort of what they value. The artifact that gives that away from me are the stockings, right? How many people do you think live in this home? At least 4. We don't know. Maybe the dog has a stocking too. I have no idea, right? Yes, you can determine from these artifacts that these people celebrate a Judeo-Christian holiday of Christmas. There's some other artifacts in there, like the ice skates. Now, here's the thing. I use this same slide when I go to the southern part of the United States, and they very quickly realize that this is not a home in the southern United States. Why? Because they don't have ice to ice skate on there, right? It never gets cold enough for snow, so they recognize that. We even got to realize in our geographic location, these artifacts say a lot about the things that we value, getting out and playing some hockey, right, on those skates. There's also a truck there. You guys have done a great job. All right, that was team. Good job. Now we're going to go to pair, all right? And perfect. You guys are sitting in pairs, and you're left on your own. All right. So here's the next one. Turn to your partner. What's an artifact, and what do you think they value? And I know it's hard to play at home, but maybe you can look around at your walls and think about what do those artifacts communicate what you value. Okay, pairs, what'd you say? What are some artifacts? Over here. They're into hunting, and the artifact that told you that was the deer head. Yes. This group over here. Ooh, there's some mindfulness here. There's a lot of relaxation things. That chair, nice swinging chair, right? Getting that chair settled down after a long, hard day. I will tell you, I don't think these people have kids, because if you have kids, that is not a chair. That's called a swing, all right? That you're going to swing over that lava on the floor, right? Our artifacts communicate a lot about how we live, too. Now, artifacts aren't just what you have on your wall. It's the communication that you have with each other. It's the vocabulary you use. And so when you think about that, just make sure to maintain. I didn't just come in here to look at what was on the walls. I came in here and listened to what the people were saying. And we pulled those artifacts out and the values they were communicating, like the promise. All right, you guys, that was team. We did team, pair, and now last one, solo. You're on your own for this one, all right? I need you to figure out what this person believes, okay? Okay, no laughs. I got laughs last night, but usually I get a lot of laughs. Yes, this person believes that it is the year of the Viking, right? 2022, right? Super Bowl 2022 is going to be a Vikings championship. I don't know if that's going to happen, and probably you guys are Chicago or Indianapolis fans here, so that's all right. Vikings don't need to win. Very sorry, I am a Lions fan. I'll say that. It's a tough road for us right now. Okay, that's it. We're moving on. I use these things to shape the audit, but I also need to bring up one more piece of science, all right? And this is a really important piece, and when I work with teachers, this is something I use all the time. And so it's kind of framed for teachers right now, but I need to understand it impacts everybody, because everyone spent 13 years usually in school, in kindergarten through 12th grade, experiencing what school is like, and that forms our judgment about what school should be. It forms our judgment about what the culture of school should be. But I love this piece of research by Dan Lordy. It's called the Apprenticeship of Observation. And in it, this is what happened. Dr. Lordy, went into an American public school and spent an entire year there observing the teachers, the principal, the bus drivers, everybody. And after a year, he walked out and he said the American public school system would be the most difficult organizational culture to change, bar none. And he said, this is why the Apprenticeship of Observation. We are the only field that socialize our new employees, our employees, the people that you hired this year, we socialized them for 13 years when they themselves were students. Educators have been socialized in their field since childhood and have adopted the norms. I want you to understand just how different that is from every other profession, all right? In schools, we were socialized for 13 years, and as children, we watched those stories, we listened to the vocabulary, we listened to the norms, and we accepted that as the way it's supposed to be. If you want your child to be a dentist, you don't take them to a dentist office at 4 years old and drop them off there to observe for 13 years before they go off to dentist school. We're the only profession that does that. And everybody, whether or not you're an educator or you're a parent, you spent that time in school and it started to form your opinion on what school should be. The other thing that I need to mention, especially about educators, is that generally educators were very good students. They continue to have one of the highest GPAs in state colleges all the way around. Usually the second highest GPA on campus belongs to that of teachers. They're really good students. Teachers were great. We were great at playing school. And so, we're socialized, we're great at playing school, and so to be quite frank, when a kid struggles in our class, sometimes we struggle to connect with that student and their struggle because we didn't have struggles ourselves. And I know everyone has struggles in different ways, but it's something we have to understand, that we were good students and sometimes we have a hard time understanding why we need to use a different strategy to help meet the needs of a different learner. And I'm painting with a very broad brush because I have been in the classrooms in Elkhart and I have seen beautiful, wonderful, research-based, focused instruction that the teachers were doing. The last two is that as educators, sometimes we subconsciously protect the system. I think actually many people do. It's the way school's supposed to be. Don't change that. And that sometimes we actually develop obstacle courses around those changes to make sure we keep things status quo. The Apprenticeship of Observation, when I read it, really informs me about why we struggle to make change in schools, and something I try to say because it's woven throughout pieces of the audit, especially when we look at Priority 1. All right, moving on. There's the instructional piece. So let's talk about the sections of the audit right now. And the first section is the Elkhart Promise. The audit evaluated, give me a moment here. The audit evaluated the implementation of the district's mission, the Elkhart Promise. The promise was found branded in multiple artifacts. The audit found staff, both instructional and non-instructional, parents and community members, had a strong grasp of the goal and the purpose of the district through the promise that is said constantly. Work needs to be done around making sure the promise still aligns with the board's intent. That conversation, though, is the key because it can act as a way to renew the focus on the promise and make sure all elements of the district culture are aligned to making sure the Elkhart Promise comes true. Some evidence is found where that 17 out of 17 community members, staff members, and parents were aware of the promise. 16 out of 17 of that same group could actually provide the wording. And please understand that that is very atypical because I travel to many districts and many of the educators within the district don't know their mission statement. And in this community, these educators, the non-certificated staff, the bus drivers, everyone, the community members, they know the elements of the promise. The power of that should not be underestimated. The vocabulary of the Elkhart Promise was found layered through multiple artifacts over the last few years, including presentations and handouts. It was referred to during multiple recorded presentations that were found. It's located on the district websites in the strategic plan. The staff survey artifact had 82% of the staff citing that they understood how important their job was to the mission of the district, and that perception actually grew between 2019 and 2021, and it was found posted in the offices. The Elkhart Promise is a district mission vision statement. It's a driving force for the Elkhart organizational culture. Elkhart has done uncommonly well getting the promise into the minds of the organization's members and community. The board members reviewing this audit should recognize the power of the mission statement and discuss it as it connects to the goals of the district. It is advised as the board members and superintendent either revise the promise or have the conversation needed so all members and the superintendent acknowledge the presence and purpose of the promise in its current form and move forward with it. And that is section 1. Section 2 is going to be a little bit different. Dr. Tallheimer is actually going to have some parts here where he's going to come up and explain some of these little pieces, but I want to open by just saying the 6 priorities were built to help achieve the promise. The audit looked at the 6 priorities of the superintendent. Through the survey tool, observations, and interview, the audit found the 6 priorities had become or were currently developing as part of the Elkhart culture. And with that, I want to bring Dr. Tallheimer back to the microphone.
Thank you, Alex. So what we thought would be important was for people who may not be familiar with these, and we wanted to get these in front of you, would be to provide a little bit of an explanation of each of these priority areas. So again, thinking back to those early days in early 2019, identifying that in order for us to move student achievement as a district, there were things that we really needed to work on. And it was a combination and a balance of addressing needs of the people who work and learn here and academic strategies, teaching strategies, and looking at our test scores. So in doing that, the first priority that we identified was to focus on instructional practices to help individual and institutional health. There were issues as I entered the district about people working collaboratively. There were silos that were in places. People were in areas of distrust. Conversations around the merger had led to some distrust or people feeling like maybe they weren't always listened to. And we wanted to make sure that we had practices in place that began to take care of our students as people and to take care of our staff. So one of the things that we were looking at was, and you see these kind of put up there, is that we were looking at practices related to things like mindfulness, referenced before. So when we have students who are not able to regulate their own behavior, how can we help them find a way to get in a place where they are regulating their behavior, practicing some self-control, and being able to be in a place to learn? One of the other things that brain science has taught us over the past several years is that for students that grow up in an environment of trauma, where there is constant turmoil or stress in their life, there has been a famous study that's done that looked at the impact of children growing up in homes where there was physical or sexual or mental abuse, or where parents were incarcerated, or there was substance abuse in the home. In all of those instances, those students are exposed to a great amount of stress as children, and that does rewire their brain in ways that their neurotransmitters and their brain chemicals are always firing, thus putting them in a place where they come into kindergarten not able to regulate their behavior and not able to be in a position to learn. So it was important for us that as we looked across the board, what do we need to do to help with those strategies to help students be able to learn the academics that we're giving them? The other piece is that we wanted to make sure that we were building students' capacity to be employable and to communicate and cooperate with other people and to be ready for the world of work. So when we looked at those skills, the district had put in place the PRIDE framework that you may be familiar with, where we stress persistence, respect, initiative, dependability, and efficiency. And so our social and emotional learning is focused on those skills as employability skills and skills to help them be effective in their relationships with other people and in collaborating with other people in a democratic society. So all of those things that we were doing under that first priority was to help us be able to instruct students that way. And one other challenge to kind of the traditional way of looking at schooling was that we began to implement some restorative practices. And with restorative practices, it sort of was taking two different forms. One is that we were using that to build climates and environments in our classrooms where students had the opportunity to contribute and communicate with each other and learn to listen to each other in working in circles where they're able to all contribute their ideas and share, and they build a sense of community. The other thing that we do is that we look at those ways to help students who might not be successful in a classroom by living up to our behavioral expectations to really assess what they're doing, to reflect on what's happening, and then reintegrate successfully back into the classroom, particularly after they may have been removed from the classroom or after a suspension or expulsion. So our goal there is to carry out what needs to be done in terms of perhaps a punishment, but then to also work at what needs to happen to make sure that those students are successful when they come back to us. That's only a benefit to society. So all of those things were to help us take care of individuals as people, and then again to look at the institutional health overall.
Thank you, Dr. Thalheimer. Priority one, we looked at. Priority one focuses on instructional practices to help individual and institutional health. The audit found that 2 of the 4 practices had become strong parts of the instructional culture. The implementation of the other 2 practices had begun but had not taken root in the instructional culture. Some variance existed at elementary, middle, and high school levels. The audit found some conflicting messages regarding this priority of the superintendent and suggests the needs of realignment around this priority. And I'm going to break each one down for you. First we have, and they're a little out of order of how they were in the audit, but we asked the teachers about, had your school initiated trauma-informed practices? And across the board, the 311 instructional staff that did this survey responded in the affirmative. There's a slight variance at the high school level, but it's still incredibly high. Restorative justice practices are an alternative to traditional disciplinary action that center on punishment for behavior and breaking rules. Traditional punishments push students, disproportionately students of color and low income, out of their classrooms and school community. They may be suspended or simply sent to the principal's office, but students who are pushed out may drop out of school altogether. Research studies, some that you have already heard, have identified restorative justice practices as an effective strategy when developing sustained positive changes for student behavior, reducing bullying, and reducing ethnic discrepancies in suspension. Across the nation, restorative justice implementations have been marked with challenges because it is very different than the traditional system of school discipline. Oh, I read the wrong one for that one. There you go. Sorry about that. Well, I jumped down. I'll do restorative justice there. Sorry about that. We'll get back on track. So this was the implementation of restorative justice. About 50-50 at your elementary and middle, and a little bit less at the high school. Again, it was being implemented, but it had not grown the deep roots. Now let me go back to one that we were very successful with, trauma-informed practice. So trauma-informed practices are when school systems approach students through the trauma lens. They are better equipped to provide the educational and social-emotional supports necessary to help students reach their potential. Trauma-informed practices are widely considered to be an effective strategy to help schools improve by making sure students who come to school with unmet needs or trauma have support to prepare them to learn. Some of the artifacts that were found. Artifacts that support the importance of trauma-informed practices were found in district-level presentations, video recording, and during visits to the schools. We actually found trauma-informed practices layered in many of the PowerPoints that were done by the superintendent, that were done to the administrative staff and the instructional staff. Teacher surveys comments revealed multiple staff from different buildings citing this as a helpful strategy. Next one that we found to be very successful was social emotional wellness or social emotional learning practices. And as you can see from the data, an 80% or plus implementation that was perceived by staff. Classroom social emotional wellness strategies have a positive impact on students' academic and help reduce risky behavior associated with adolescence. Strategies that help build social emotional learning in the classroom range from building self-management skills and executive functioning to social awareness building, the ability to help them empathize with others, and relationship building activities. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted students' social emotional well-being. When considering how to make sure Elkhart realigns academic growth, leaving out social emotional would leave out a research-identified necessity. Some of the artifacts that were found in the buildings and in the interviews, artifacts around the audits related to social emotional support were plentiful. This included scannable QR codes that students could easily access with their phones for private support. Hallway displays about social emotional topics could be found throughout the buildings. Staff seemed to have a solid understanding that students can't learn if they're experiencing personal turmoil. Teacher survey comments revealed a teacher comment about this strategy had helped them achieve the Elkhart Promise. SEL, talk to kids regularly, know them by name, use their name, catch them doing things well. Also, and I mentioned this before, artifacts from the administrative presentations were found to highlight the importance of social emotional learning. Next, restorative justice practices, which I did read that data for you earlier. Teacher survey, open-ended questions cited success with restorative justice practices. Restorative justice has worked well for me a few times. There were no mentions of restorative justice found when I did the school culture audits. And the superintendent interview cited this as a strategy that had had success before, but there is an opportunity cost when looking at other adoptions and implementing the other strategies. And then finally, we've already brought it up, mindfulness strategies. Mindfulness strategies, again, had about a 50-50 split when you look at all the data combined, a little bit more implementation at the elementary schools. But this is a really hard one to gauge because just like the research, mindfulness is always coupled with trauma-informed practices or social-emotional learning. So sometimes we couple it with those practices. Let me tell you a little bit about Mindfulness Strategies. Mindfulness strategies take on multiple forms, from mediation to breathing exercises to sensory experiences. The use of mindfulness strategies has both been identified to help impact teacher stress and classroom climate. Many times in the research, mindfulness is coupled with other strategies listed in Priority 1. In multiple peer-reviewed research studies, this mindfulness strategy increased self-efficacy of students, increased their level of resilience, and reduced the anxiety that they had experienced. A few of the evidence, I have an evidence here. Many teachers' comments reflected positive implementations of mindfulness. The students love when I do guided visualization meditation with them. And mindfulness practices, such as the calming corner, helps with students who are in the beginning stages of escalation. These comments reveal an understanding of the purpose behind mindfulness and their use. Again, we saw all 4 priorities in your school. We found a full integration of trauma-informed practices and social-emotional learning practices, and then about a 50-50 of the mindfulness and the restorative justice practices. The teachers were also asked, which one made the biggest impact in your classroom? And this is important for us to know because it tells us where the implementation is. And they said social-emotional and trauma-informed, just like the data from the pie charts communicated. And again, the work needs to be done about restorative practices, restorative justice, and mindfulness. And now we're going to move on to section 2.
Priority 2 for us, as we were identifying the things that were going to help be real levers that help move improvement in the district, whereas for us to look at our collaborative culture of our teachers and the professional learning communities. We use that phrase a lot within the district, and we abbreviate it to PLCs. The goal of a PLC is that you work on your school improvement model by having a team, a school improvement team, or a guiding coalition that helps determine the direction of the school overall. And it is occupied by members of the teaching staff and other staff from the building, working with the administrator to determine the direction that the building wants to go by looking at data and looking at other information. Then within that, grade level teams, so 3rd grade teachers, or department teams, like maybe English teachers, or here at the high school, School of Study teams, which cross disciplines, get together and have conversations about what are we teaching. The main questions that we want to ask are, what is it that we want students to know? How do we know that they know it? What do we do when they don't know it? And what do we do when they do? And those 4 driving questions direct the activities of those various teams as they're doing that work in day-to-day work with students. We also then work collaboratively as a district. As I came in and found many places that were siloed, one of my goals was for our leadership team to be able to become larger and to pull more people into conversations so that our buildings and operations folks were in the same meetings as our instructional people so that people would understand the relationship between our facilities and what's happening instructionally. So all of that effort has been to try to tear that down and be able to have us be our most effective and best by collaborating and working with each other.
So priority 2, the audit found, priority 2 focused on the development of teacher collaborative teams and the professional learning community system. The audit found a strong level of integration of these concepts into the instructional culture. The audit also identified some challenges that the district faces as it moves forward. And one of those challenges is a staffing issue, and our teachers at our secondary level having a hard time identifying the time when they can devote those minutes to collaboration. The elementary team reflected or had the perception that they would collaborate over 150 minutes a week. And the high school group identified they collaborated 20 minutes a week, and it's because of those shortages and how we have them moved around. It's going to be a challenge moving forward. PLCs have to have dedicated time to collaboration or they don't work. Now here is, though, the good news. The staff understands that this is going on in the building. Do you have a collaborative PLC team? Almost everyone in the district knows exactly that they do. Moreover, another part of the collaborative or the PLC process is having a guided coalition. And the teachers are also asked, do you have a guiding coalition? A group that looks at data, identifies those strategies to help kids learn when they're not learning, and helps determine the training and the plan moving forward. How do we build that collective leadership and collective responsibility in the school? And overall, your schools reported a very high integration of guiding coalitions or school improvement teams. And I have the great fortune of helping schools in many places across the country, and many places do not have school improvement teams. You have a structure as part of your culture that's about identifying what needs to grow, and teacher leadership is a portion of that, and it's really, really strong. All right. I think there we go. There we go. Priority 3.
So our third priority focused on curriculum. As I came into the district, we were in a position where a lot of decisions were being pushed out to individual buildings. Things were rather site-based rather than coordinated clearly at the district level about what's important. In my first year here, we had conversations about what are the guaranteed standards or the guaranteed learnings that we want to make sure every student has, regardless which one of our buildings they're in. We also wanted to look at data to understand how is it that our students are performing. Where is it that we need to maybe invest in some more training on those instructional strategies to make sure that we're moving all of our students. We also didn't have a core phonics program. So over the past year, even with everything that was going on with the pandemic and the trying year that we had, we adopted a core phonics program for our primary grades so that we can make sure that in grades K1 and 2, students are learning their letters and sounds as a good foundation of reading to be ready to read by 3rd grade and do well on the iRead test. We've also implemented assessments that we're doing through our reading program, and we adopted a core math program. We've also increased the number of science kits that we're using in our elementary buildings. We're looking at our science sequence across our middle school. We revamped our college and career readiness class at our middle schools. And of course, the major change over the past couple of years has been the shift to the School of Study model and doing more project-based learning and learning across content areas at Elkhart High School. All of those have been efforts that we've done to improve instructional strategies and improve outcome for students by making learning more engaging and to provide them really solid curriculum so that they can be their best as they learn.
So implementation of new curriculum is always a challenge because it takes work of the teachers to learn a new curriculum and bring in new material and figure out how it works and how you blend your instruction with that material. It's a challenge, and you can't do it all at once. The district has moved very quickly and adopted the most needed curricular pieces to help support their teachers and their students. But they haven't done everything, right? They have paced it out because it's always a teeter-totter to try to make sure you do it at the right pace. And they have found a very aggressive but manageable pace with this. When teachers were asked over the last 2 years, has new core content curriculum been implemented in your school? The elementary obviously said yes because many of the curricular adoptions you just heard were elementary based, and the high school had a split, right? Because you didn't do all core subjects at the high school level. All in all, the district finds a good balance with this. It's never a perfect balance. It's never perfect, but the district finds a good one and moves ahead. Especially considering the trying times that we've been in, you've adopted new curriculum that the students need. Priority 4.
One thing I would add regarding the priority 3 and the core curriculum pieces is people are often asking us what are we doing with those ESSER funds from the federal government that were provided to help fill in on learning loss. And it's those funds that have afforded us the opportunity to adopt that phonics program, to be able to increase our use of science kits, and to provide our teachers the training on all of those curricula. So when people are asking what are you doing with those dollars, because you sure received a lot of them, yes, and it's enabled us to do some really good things and again move at that pace that Dr. McNeece referenced. Priority 4 focused on intervention. So if we go back to those 4 questions from PLCs, what do we want students to know? How do we know that they know it? What do we do when they don't? What do we do when they do? The last 2 questions are related to the series of interventions and the things that we do. So when we look at students who either are not getting the material as we're covering it or aren't mastering those skills, or we're looking at students at the other end who already have those skills and master them rather quickly, What are we doing as interventions and enrichment for those students? The other thing that we look at is what's called a multi-tiered system of support. So for all students in our classroom, you have this basic tier 1 level. Everybody gets this instruction, everybody's provided these kind of interventions or strategies, but then we'll have a segment of students, a small percentage of students for whom that won't work, 20% or 15%. So those students need additional help, some additional mentoring, some additional tutoring, some additional social and emotional supports, maybe some behavior therapy. So they move into what's becoming a tier 2. So those students, we need to have a system in place for them. And then what do we do for tier 3 students, the smallest percentage of students with the most intense needs? And we do those 3 tiers academically. So where are they in terms of their learning and mastery of material? What do we do with that in terms of behavior and escalating behaviors? And what do we do with that in terms of social and emotional and personal development of the kind that we talked about earlier? So those have been systems that we put in place in order to make sure that we're taking care of the whole child.
So for priority 4, focused on intervention models. Dr. Thalheimer just mentioned that. This is a part of the instructional culture of Elkhart. It has been suggested this could be a possible area of growth through the identification of additional instructional strategies, and the process to implement those strategies are layered in the audit itself. We want to make sure students come to us ready to learn, and we're doing those things to help them be ready. And in priority 4, it talks about academic rigor, and how to build that is through instructional strategies. And can we identify what is working the best in Elkhart schools, and then help identify what that is, celebrate what that is, and help spread that to every teacher's toolbox. Teachers were asked, how successful do you feel your MTSS system has been? And the blue, dark blue is elementary, teal is middle school, and green is high school. And then across the bottom, we have the academic support, English learners, and then the behavior support. Almost every one of these scores sat above that 2.5 mark out of 5, right there, right above the middle mark. Elementary seem to have higher scores for all of these. And when I look at middle school is the one that said maybe we need to look at our MTSS system a little bit more. Priority 5.
So our 5th priority was working on communication. Again, through the process of the merger, and as I first came in and we had our first referendum campaign in 2019, there were a lot of people who were feeling like, again, they weren't being listened to, they didn't know what was going on, there were lots of questions about what the merger meant. There were just lots of issues related to communication externally. And then we also internally just had a system where people didn't always feel like they knew what was going on, that they had a connection to what we were doing as a district, and that messaging always wasn't clear. So one of the things that I did was work with my team that every Friday I send out a learning brief to our entire staff. And in there I highlight things that are happening. I share nuggets of wisdom, things to think about, reflect on things that I'm reading, and share aspects of myself, always with the goal of helping other people be reflective about what they're doing. We put job postings in there, we put community connections in there. WNIT provides us a schedule for things that are going on that you can share as learning with families and those kind of things. So that became our main communication tool every Friday. And I also do videos and things at various times. With families, we have tried to make our communication greater by putting out more documentation around the things that were happening, stepped up the communication regarding the merger and what was happening there. I also do videos frequently that get communicated out to families. So after our board last evening went to the mask optional status for us as a district, this morning I recorded a video that got sent out to all families today, along with the guidance about what all that means and what changes would be in place. Our goal being is that we're always wanting to make sure that people are understanding what's going on and what's happening, and that we can eliminate as many questions or confusion for people as possible. We also work really hard to communicate with our community partners, and so we've stepped up a lot of work that we've been doing with after-school programs. We've intensified the work that we do in summer camps and summer programs, and have really been trying to work solidly with community partners so that they can be a part of the work that we do with students as well.
So priority 5 focused on communication with parents and the community. The audit found that this was a priority that had continued growth over the last 3 years. The perception exists that the district does a better job communicating to parents than the community, but overall, the communication culture was very positive, and it's impossible to miss the newsletter that is sent out, the videos that are created. It is a strong function of the district, is the communication culture that the district has with the parents. It was one finding in this area saying, how do you communicate to the community, and how could you improve that to make sure that the message is absolutely clear, on target, and you're celebrating the great things that you do here. Priority 6.
So the final priority that we had as I arrived was for us to successfully complete the high school merger, which had been in process and planning for years, and for us to demonstrate fiscal responsibility. So it was important for us as we came in that we made sure that we made the merger of the high school go as successfully as possible. And it's important for people to understand that there are very few places around the country that do this. You have academies in Nashville, you have Shakopee up north that does this, and there really is not a guidebook or a plan book for how to do that, particular for an individual community. So our folks met weekly in sessions to determine what are the next steps and what needs to happen. All of the people from across the director of guidance to administrators to teachers all engaged in the work that needed to happen. And then to make sure that we were successful with that and began to look at that project-based learning, we've engaged in some learning with Ford Next Generation and have had some training on that within the district, and have provided opportunities again from the ESSER funds this past summer for teachers to be able to engage in that training. We feel that while there were hiccups relative to transportation and parking on this campus at the beginning of the year, staffing challenges that have been made it difficult for schools of study to really work together the way they wanted to, that despite those challenges and just hiccups that came along the way, that we've been fairly successful in making that happen, and that people have worked really, really hard to live out the vision of that model that was established by a previous school board and the administrators at the time. The other piece is that we want to make sure that we're communicating to people our fiscal realities and our fiscal health, and the things that we're doing. Over the time and during presentations I've done at various times, I've shared with the reductions that we made in administrative staff, the cost savings that we have from our energy program, and the things that we do with our energy officer. All of those things are done in order to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars and to make sure that we're living within the means that we have as a district.
Thank you, Dr. Thalheimer. So priority 6 was very easy for the audit to see because the merger was complete in the high school, and fiscal responsibility was being demonstrated. The audit found the merging complete, and the district finances reflected fiscal health. That concluded Section 2. Section 3, because we interviewed we interviewed the superintendent, the executive administration, and all of our board members. Section 3 focused on governance and communication. This section of the audit studied the governance and communication culture of the Board of Education. It identifies the caring and problem-solving nature of their service because it is a challenging job, and they give their energy and time to helping improve Elkhart schools and making the Elkhart Promise come true. The audit also makes suggestions for possible areas of growth in communication, district access, chain of communication, and professional development.
So in sum, we feel that the audit affirmed and made sure that we were working on the right things. As we read through the whole body of what Dr. McNeece and his team provided for us, there are 3 kind of distinct areas that stand out for us as the things that we will work on. One would be for the board and I to work with stakeholders and with the school community to reaffirm and review the Elkhart Promise as it's worded, what it embodies, all of those things, so that we are, again, tightening our understanding of what that is, and we're doubling down on our commitment to making sure that all students are ready for their futures. The second thing that we're walking away from this audit with is that we know that we have some great things happening internally within the district, but we need to hold up or lift up those really good instructional practices and those high-impact classroom management strategies so that those can become ways that we share that information and share those good things with other teachers within the district. So the same way that we've seen trauma-informed practices catch on, the things that are happening around our social and emotional and employability and resilience work that we're doing with students, we now need to make sure that now that we're getting in a better position for students to learn, now we need to strengthen those instructional pieces so that's as strong. And then the third thing is regarding communication. We obviously, from the information within the audit, can do a better job telling our story. So for us, it will be very important for us to look at the way that we communicate, the different avenues and channels that we use, to which groups we communicate, and then how can we celebrate the successes of our students, how can we play up and hold up and exemplify those partnerships that we have with community partners, and then just make sure that everyone understands all the things that we're doing to live up to the Elkhart Promise. I thank you for turning out this evening and hearing the results of this audit and seeking to understand better what it is that we do. Thank you for those of us that joined us online. And I very much appreciate Dr. McNeece and his team for the work that they did in coming in and helping us improve as a district to, again, continue to live up and fulfill that Elkhart Promise for our students. Thank you very much.